All right, tell me, before your last big job interview, did you spend an embarrassingly long time in front of the closet? I see some people nodding. Well, I did. I chose a red sweater in the end because I once read somewhere that it would make you more convincing, and I was gonna do anything to convince them. So I think we all know that feeling, trying to control everything before your job interview. It's just the universal dread of job search. Luckily, we have recruiters to guide us through this process, and they are human, which is amazing. But it also means that they have limitations. They cannot remember hundreds of resumes in perfect detail, and they do have some biases like all of us, like slightly favoring a candidate that reminds them of themselves. So now we are turning to AI to overcome these human limitations. We hope for a more efficient, but also a more objective process, probably. However, these technologies also amplify the biases that are already in there, so it might end up making it less objective. So this is where my research comes in. We want to make sure that we let the domain experts define what bias actually means, because if we use an algorithm and we want to monitor that and decrease the biases of the algorithm, then first we have to make sure what this bias means to them. Because the most dangerous thing we could do is let a technologist like me decide what is ethical for everyone else out there. So that's what we're doing. We're making sure that we visualize these metrics in an understandable way, because there's a lot of metrics out there and it gets a bit tricky. And then we capture their fairness notions, and we make sure that we build a continuous consensus with them on what bias means to them, so that we can use that to debias the algorithms. Let's take these one at a time. First, why is AI maybe not so smart if we don't monitor it? And then what are we doing to try to help with this problem? So, AI. I think we're at the Flanders AI Research Day, so we all know this, but it's only as good as the data you put in there, right? So if we train it on decades and decades of historical biased recruiting data, it will quickly learn that, a nurse should probably not be called Bart. That one is unsurprising, might seem easy to fix, but there are a lot of other biases in there that we don't see so easily. So we need to fix that. We need to monitor that, and I think we all agree on that. We should debias these models. But here we go again. What is bias? So what is fair? Well, there are many, many, many metrics out there, unfortunately. And if you optimize for one metric, you will certainly score worse on other metrics. That's just how it works, unfortunately. So even worse, actually, there is something we call fairness washing, which means that companies just pick the metric that makes them look best. And it's not necessarily out of bad will, it's just because it takes a lot of time to understand all of the nuances of the different metrics. And, there's not one clear answer, so why would you do it? So instead of focusing on one mathematical formula or outcome or answer, we are actually trying to facilitate the conversation around it with the domain experts. So for this, we developed a dashboard. I'm going to prove to you that we actually developed a dashboard. But for the sake of this pitch, I'm just not going to bore you with all the details. Oh, I went too far. There we go. Proof. Our idea here is that we want to visualize these metrics in a more simple way so that they really understand the trade-offs and they can build a conversation around it, capture their notions of fairness, because that's the most important part, and continuously, with these digital tools, build a consensus with them, with what is fairness to you guys, what is bias, what do you find important. So that's kind of where we want to go here. We want to make sure that with this dashboard, these people can actually, like the domain experts, can say, hey, if we adjust this algorithm this way, what would be the effect on women with a gap in their resume or people that don't necessarily speak Dutch? So the end goal of what we're doing is making the technology understandable, the ethical implications of it very understandable, to people that do have a stake but don't necessarily are familiar with the technology that we're working with here. So in short, embed, translate the complex AI metrics, embed the domain expert knowledge here, and just make sure that it's more accessible to everyone. So we build them the right tools to actually do it with us. So that in the future, there will be scalability in the hiring process. We let the technology do all the sifting through the resumes, sure, so that the recruiter can actually focus on connecting with the candidate. We let the technology focus on remembering all the details so that the recruiter can focus on this one person's story. That's important. So hopefully, for your next big job interview or that of your kids. They will just have a system that's fair for everyone, and they will not need the red sweater.